the validations, derivations, duplicate check. So those under the data quality topic. Okay, so there is one last topic that is pending in the data quality, but for that one we need system access. Okay, maybe what we can do is we can start with the data replication. Once we got the access, I'll show you that configuration. So let's start with the data replication framework. So after data quality, we have the next topic is data replication framework. Okay, so that we call it as a DRF. Okay, data replication framework. Okay, so basically this data replication framework deals with how to replicate the master data. Okay, so because we are calling MDG as a single source system, this is the source of truth for all your master data. So the data gets created in your MDG system. Okay, and from here, once the master data get whoever business users they wanted to create the master data, whether it is a MMRBP, customer vendor, finance objects, or any master data. So they do that master data creation here. And after that, the once the master data is created in this particular system, so you might be having some target systems. We call this these are the your transactional system. So in the transactional system where the transactional activities are happening, so there we need this particular master data to perform the transactional activities. So that's where the master data gets created over here and the data replicated to the respective transactional systems. Okay, so as soon as the master data gets created, so depends on your business needs and requirements, which master data to be replicated to which system. So that's where we will be doing the configuration for as part of the data replication framework. We do all the configuration. So then basically this is what the data replication talks. And it's not only about replicating the master data to MDG from MDG to the target systems. So the typical from with respect to the data replication, so you can see the data will be replicated to all the required target systems, and these target systems may be SAP systems or it can be probably non-SAP systems as well. Okay, so that's where the data can replicate to all these respective target systems. Okay, and along with that one, the data replication framework DRF configuration also talks about inbound process. Okay, so that means the master data, let's say some due to certain in some business scenarios, the data will get created in the respective source systems. Okay, in some of the typical customer scenarios, what happens is they might be having some old legacy systems where the data gets created. Okay, so these we can call it as our source systems. Okay, so the data gets created in this particular source system, and when the data gets created, it might be some basic information. So as soon as the data gets created and we wanted to replicate the data from this particular source system to MDG system, so that in MDG system we can actually further enrich that master data, and from there we can replicate to the transactional or your actual target systems where this data is required. Okay, so this particular DRF configuration always deals with inbound as well as outbound, both inbound scenarios as well as outbound scenarios. Okay, now so how the data replication happens. Okay, so if you look at the typical MDG, so basically this is your MDG layer and this is the underlying ERP layer. Okay, so you have a staging tables and this is your active area tables, nothing but your ERP tables. Okay, so initially when user log into MDG system and when he is creating the data, so the data initially gets stored into your staging tables, and after final activation, right after the final activation successfully happens, then the inactive record will turn into active record. So which means in case of reuse mode, so this data will be moved to your actual application specific tables automatically. Okay, so your active record gets stored over here, active record. Okay, now whereas in case of flex mode, your inactive record basically turn into active and it will get stored here itself. Okay, so that means in case of reuse mode, you will have your active records here. In case of flex mode, you will have your active records here. So this data replication framework is a part of your MDG component. So what happens is this data, as soon as your change request returns that activation successful and workflow is completed, then your change request framework will submit that request, will call this DRF API technical in the background. Okay, so as soon as it calls the DRF API, so what happens is this particular, and it will pass the corresponding change request number. Technically, it passes the change request number. So this DRF framework, what it will do is, based on this particular change request number, it will identify what is this object, whether it is a material or or BP or customer vendor, or what is this object. So from the change request number, it will understand what is the data model, because if you look at from the change request number, you can get what is the change request type. From the CR type, at the CR type level, we are assigning the data model. So that's why it will determine what is this particular data model and object. So from there, it will actually look at whether it is a reuse or flex mode. If it is a reuse mode, so based on that particular change request to the key, it will actually read your active record from the underlying table. Okay, in case it is a flex mode, it will read the data active record from your staging table. So ultimately, this DRF framework will read the data in case of reuse from your application tables. In case of flex mode, it will read the data from your staging table. So once it read that particular data, then in the DRF, we will be doing some DRF configuration. So based on the configuration that is maintained in the DRF, so system will understand that what are the target systems that it has to replicate this particular master data. So that's how this framework will replicate the data to the respective target systems. Okay, so this is how it works, your data replication framework. Okay, now you need to understand one thing when it comes to the data replication framework, how to replicate the data. Okay, using which technique it will replicate the data. So in that one, that we call it as your communication mode. Okay, so that communication mode, how it will replicate the data from one system to other system. So it uses your underlying technologies like your IDOC approach, or else SOA, okay, or else file based and RFC based. Okay, so these are the four techniques it uses when you are actually, when it once it read the data. Now how to replicate it, using which communication mode it has to replicate the master data. That's where these techniques come into picture. Okay, so SAP or MDG not introduced any new methodology or technique to replicate the data. Okay, so which means these are the techniques that are already being used without MDG as well. So the same thing, SAP reuses the same technology to replicate the data. Okay, so that means what happens is, when you are actually, before you are getting into this particular replication configuration, okay, so by that time, so all your IDOC, where do we do the IDOC configuration?
W20.
Yeah. So whatever that IDOC ALE configuration, right? So we have some bunch of activities like WE20, the partner profile creation, and the creation of code W21. And we also have something called up that, what is that, BD64. Okay. So there are multiple ways that we do this IDOC configuration. Okay. And for material, we use the message type as mat mass. Okay. And cremas. Okay, then deb mass. All these are the different message type we use for different master data, right? So, and for classification, CLF mass. Okay, so it uses all these existing message types only, and this configuration. That means, if at all I wanted to replicate, this is my MDG system. Okay, I wanted to replicate the data from my MDG system to these two target systems. Okay, first there should be this IDOC configuration, partner profile configuration should be created as part of, before you start working on your DRF configurations. Okay, so it should be there between your MDG to this target system and between MDG to this particular target system. Okay, so this configuration should be already there. Okay, so then on top of this one, we will have, as part of MDG introduce certain configuration. So we use this DRF configuration to read the data from your active area, and once it read that active area data, then it look up into the respective techniques that we configured as part of in the DRF configuration itself. We say that what is your target system, and for each target system, what is the mode of communication, IDOC or SOA or file. Okay, so all this we will maintain as part of your DRF configuration. So from the DRF configuration, it will look up what are the target systems it has to replicate the data, and what is the communication mode for each of these particular systems. It will read all this configuration, and finally it will prepare that IDOC or whatever that SOA and everything. It will just trigger that message. then the already existing configuration that you already done as part of in your ERP layer, so that configuration will come into picture and it will be used to create that IDOCs to the target systems. Okay, so this is with respect to IDOC techniques. Okay, similarly, we also have something called SOA. Okay, so especially these SOA messages we use when you wanted to connect with some non-SAP systems, right? For non-SAP systems or even from SAP to SAP also, depends on different type of objects. We use SOA as also one of the communication technique. Okay, so this is like your HTTP calls. SOA uses your HTTP call, and for in case of SOA replication as well. So this SOA setup has to be done between that MDG and your target system. So this SOA setup has to be done, and in actually in real time. So this SOA configuration will be done by basis people. Okay, so IDOC ALE configuration can be done by functional or technical. That means basically the SAP application specific team like MDG functional or MDG technical can do these configurations. But SOA configuration, when it comes to SOA configuration, this will be done by basis people. Okay, so they'll be doing these configurations, and they use that SOA manager. The T code is SOA manager. So in the SOA manager, they do all these configurations with respect to SOA thing. Okay, so once the SOA configuration is done by basis between source and target systems, then you can go ahead and create a DRF configuration. And while creating this configuration, you can select, okay, to T1 target system, I wanted to replicate the message using SOA message, and to T2 target system, I want to replicate using IDOC technique. Okay, so likewise, it's system to system, object to object. You can use which technique you wanted to follow to replicate this particular master data. Okay, so this is at very high level the introduction of your data replication framework. So now when it comes to data replication configuration, there are two steps from MDG side, only two steps that we need to follow. Okay, so let me first show that in an Excel. Okay, so there are two steps. Step one is define business systems. Okay, so this is the first step in SOA configuration, define business systems. Okay, so let's also draw one diagram over here. Okay, I have two target systems, and from MDG, as soon as the master data gets created, the data has to be replicated to these target systems. Okay, now here to T1 target system, I wanted to replicate material master. Okay, and let's say I also wanted to replicate customer master. Okay, and to T2 target system, I wanted to replicate material master and vendor master data. Okay, so likewise, maybe it's not required to replicate all the data to all the target systems. Depends on what this target system needs. This target system need only and customer data, and T2 target system needs only and vendor master data. So this is what the requirement. And for when it comes to material master, I wanted to replicate using IDOC technique. Okay, and for customer master, I wanted to replicate using SOA. Similarly, here we wanted to replicate using IDOC, and vendor master, I wanted to replicate this one also using IDOC. Okay, so likewise for each object, which technique you wanted to do. So this is the requirement. Okay, now here the first step that we discussed is define business system. Okay, so this T1, T2, we will consider it as a business systems. Okay, so T1 and T2 are the two business systems for us. Okay, so first we need to represent this business system in this step one in DRF configuration. Okay, so the business, so here the business systems are T1 and T2. So let's say, for example, I'll represent T1 is my business system. Okay, so now when you create this particular business system, T1 business system, and after that, under this particular T1 business system, what objects you wanted to replicate to this particular T1 system. As per this diagram, I wanted to replicate and customer. So you can say and customer. Okay, so now here, so once this is done, okay, so first define your, when you are defining the business system, you need to specify what is your business system, and after that, under that particular business system, you need to specify what are the objects that you wanted to replicate. Okay, now for each object, what is the communication mode that you wanted to replicate? Use for this object. Let's say for material master, I wanted to replicate using IDOC. Okay, for customer master, I wanted to replicate using SOA. Okay, so these are the two things. Okay, so now this is what whenever you're specifying, let's say for example T2 business system. For T2 business system also we wanted to replicate material master that using IDOC technique. Okay, and then vendor master is also using IDOC. Okay, so likewise, how many business systems that you have in your landscape, you need to define those business systems. Under each business system, you need to specify what are the objects that you wanted to replicate. At the same time, for each object, what is the communication mode that you wanted to replicate. So this completes your first step, defining your business systems. Okay. Now, step two. So in this one, there is something called define replication models. Okay. So define replication models. So this is the step two. So in this one, what happens is, in this replication model means, for every object, let's say you have material master, for every object we create one replication model. So that means here for material master we will create one replication model. The name of the replication model is, let's say, rm underscore mm, which represents my replication model for my material master. Okay, so similarly you will have another replication model for customer master. Okay, another replication model for vendor master. Okay, so now when I'm specifying this replication model is for material master, that means you need to assign a data model here, here the data model is bp, and here the data model is, here also it's a bp. Okay, so you specify your what is your data model. Okay, which is fine. After that we will also specify here what is the, I mean, the target systems. So is fine, data model, then target systems. So material master, I wanted to replicate to two systems, right? So that's where you need to link your target systems over here. T1, whatever the target systems that you created in the previous configuration, you need to specify T1 and T2. Here for BP, for customer master, it is T1. For vendor master, it is T2. Okay. So likewise, you need to specify here, you need to add the business systems over here. Okay, so when you add this particular business systems, what happens is system will actually, this business system should have a valid configuration in the step one. Okay, finally it's working. Okay, fine. Okay, so basically when you specify your replication model, we are saying that this replication model is for and you will specify what are the target systems that you wanted to replicate your material master. Similarly for customer and vendor also. Okay, so at very high level, this is what we are going to maintain in your, as part of the step two in the replication model configuration. So once you do both these configurations, okay, so your replication model configuration is done. Okay, and so before going to step one and step two, as I mentioned earlier, so the prerequisite configuration should be available. So if the prerequisite configuration is available, and if you do these step one and step two configurations, your data is ready to replicate to the respective target systems. Okay, so what happens is at runtime, once my change request is activated successfully, okay, as I mentioned that the change request number will be passed to the DRF framework. Okay, and in the DRF framework, using the change request number, it will identify what is the master data, what is the data model, that is what is the master data that got created as part of this change request. So from there, it will identify the let's say or BP. So once it identify or BP, then what happens is it will take the active replication model. So there should be one active replication model for So that's what it will determine this replication model. So from this particular replication model, it will look up what are the target systems I wanted to replicate the data. So these are my two target systems. I wanted to replicate the material master data. So then it will take this T1 target system, and under the T1 target system also, it should have that as an entry. Okay, entry is there. Okay, then how to replicate this data using what technique? Then it will identify, okay, I wanted to replicate the material using IDOC. Okay, so then that's how it will look up your underlying partner profile configuration. Using that, it will create the IDOC, and the IDOC will be sent to the target system. Similarly, for T2 target system also, in a loop, it will also look up what is the second business system, T2. From there, it will look up again, its IDOC is mentioned. So it will create another IDOC to T2 target system. So at very high level, three steps. Step one, though I mentioned this is from MDG point of view 1 and 2, before that you have that prerequisite step, that is the configuration for IDOC or SOVA configurations that has to be done. Okay. Now let's look into the system and we can actually check further. Okay. So here there are two ways that you can go to the DRF configuration. One is, as usual, you can go to MDG IMG. Okay. Under that you have something called data replication settings. Okay. So this is the place where you will have the DRF configurations. Okay. There is also a direct to transaction DRF IMG. So this is also, you can use DRF IMG. That will also directly take you to the data replication framework. So, but most of the time we go with MDG IMG. From there also you can access this DRF configuration. Okay. So in DRF configuration, if you expand this, okay, so yeah, this is the first step. Step one, define technical settings for the business systems. Okay. So whatever I mentioned here, so there is the step one. So that is the define business systems over here with the technical settings for the business system. So once you open this configuration, okay, so there are some DRF configurations are there already here, but we can create our own DRF. I mean, we can define our own business system over here. Okay. So let's click on new entry. Okay. So here you need to provide some business system name. Okay. So it's a free text. You can define this. Let's say, for example, get one. You can provide some meaningful system. Let's say, for example, the target system, if you identify with some system ID or something. So there you can provide some meaningful, it's a free text, but you can provide some meaningful name over here. Okay. After that, once you provide this particular business system, you get a warning message saying that it does not exist in SLD, but that will, you can press enter, it will, that message will be ignored. Okay. So once you define your business system, the next one that we have here is logical system. Okay. So this particular logical system, basically what happens is, as part of your IDOC configuration, okay, as part of your ALE configuration, you will be creating some partner profile. Okay. So that partner profile becomes your logical system. Let me show you that. If I go to W20, right? So these are nothing but your logical systems only. See here, this is your logical system. So this particular logical system, whatever as I mentioned, this configuration should be already there. This configuration should be already exist as a prerequisite step for before you are going into the replication configuration. So assume that this configuration is already available. Now this becomes your logical system. Okay. So that's how when it is trying to generate that particular IDOC, right? So when it is generating the actual IDOC, that time whatever the logical system name that you mentioned over here, system will pick up that particular logical system. Okay. It will take that logical system, it will consider that logical system. Okay. So this logical system should be available here. Okay. So now we can use any of these logical systems. What are the logical systems are there over here? We can use any of these logical systems. Okay. So let's do S4 client 100. So I'm just using this logical system. That means with this particular, I think this is already used above. Let me do one thing. If this is already used, that's why you're getting this issue. I'll change this one. Let's say S4 local or something. Is there, right? Okay, this is also used. Okay. So now we'll go ahead with this our one. So the logical system I wanted to use here S4 client 100. So this is the logical system. So with this logical system, even if you are replicating using IDOC or SOVA service, in both the cases, we will use this particular logical system. In case of IDOCs, this logical system comes from here. Okay. So there should be a logical system exist over here as part of your partner profile. Okay. That one only you will be using because I wanted to replicate the data from my MDG to some target T1 target system. So before going to the DRF configuration here itself, I will be maintaining that, okay, MatMask ad hoc setup and everything between this MDG system to the target system. So the system will always pick up this particular logical system. Okay. Now, after this, if you are going with the RFC replication, actually, we don't use RFC replication at all. 100% we go with either IDOC or SOVA replication. Okay. RFC destination used SAP provided long back in older environment, but these days we don't use RFC destination at all. But if you are going with RFC destination, so you can mention the destination name over here. If you are going with another technique, we talked about three type of replications, right? Four type of replications. One is, okay. So file, if you are going with a file replication, you need to specify what is the file path over here, so that your DRF framework will prepare that file and that file will be placed over here. Okay. So most of the, we don't actually use these two settings. We go with always either ad hoc or server application. Okay. In case of server application, basis will do all the server manager configuration, server configuration in server manager. There also they will actually use one logical system. So the same logical system you need to input. So this logical system will be picked up. If you are going with ad hoc replication or server replication, it is mandatory to maintain the logical system name over here. Okay. So the logical system name of your target system, it's a business name. Okay. You can provide in terms of your any free text, which gives a meaningful name for your target system. But this has to be available in the system, this logical system. Okay. So this logical systems, any idea where we create these logical systems? Of course, we are using in partner profile configuration here, but to use that here as well, it has to be created somewhere. Any idea where this logical system we will create? So in the cell, you can see define logical systems. So this is the place where we create the logical system. Okay, all these logical systems. And now this logical system only we will be using in your ad hoc configuration as well. Okay. So this is about logical system. And after that, this Unicode and all these things, all these are available in earlier version, in older version before 4.3, or we have R3 version, right? So there some of the SAP systems are non-Unicode and some of them are Unicode. So whether you need any Unicode or non-Unicode conversion, so that's where, because the representation of characters is different between Unicode and non-Unicode. But now all the SAP systems are Unicode version only. So we don't actually use these two settings as well. Okay. So at this level, you will mention only what is your business system, what is the logical system name, and after that, there is an option to disable the replication as well. So this we will discuss later. At this, okay. So let's discuss this one. So this disable, once you do all your configuration, like all your step 1 and step 2. Now, after that, maybe because of some scenario or because of certain situation, you wanted to stop the replication to this particular target system temporarily for some time. Okay. So in that case, you have a flexibility here to disable this one as well, to disable the replication. So if I select this checkbox, what happens is at the time of data replication, system won't replicate any master data to this target system because this is disabled. So you have an option to temporarily. Sometimes what happens is, if your target system is down or it is undergoing for some upgrade activity or something, so in that case, you know the time period. So during that time period, basically you can actually stop the replication. Otherwise, even if you keep it open, it is trying to replicate the data and there it will get failed unnecessarily. Okay. So for such reasons, maybe there might be a number of reasons where you wanted to stop the replication temporarily, or there is some bug, the data is getting created in the target system wrongly, and the team is working on to fix that issue. So temporarily you wanted to stop the replication. So you have a flexibility to stop the replication by using this particular checkbox. Okay. Now all the objects, okay, under this particular target system. So we discussed, right, what are the objects that you wanted to replicate. So everything, all these objects replication will get stopped. Okay. So this is at the, when you're defining your business system at very high level. And once this is done, we have the next in the same, once you define your target system, next step is you need to specify what are the objects that you wanted to replicate to this target system. So that's where in the same, you can actually go to, yeah.
In the defined business systems, when you are entering the logical system into same URL, right? So only one, if you go on the above design business system. Yeah.
So yeah, I got your question. So basically, one logical system can be represented with one business system only. You cannot have two business systems with the same logical system name.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So because if you there, it will be like confusing, right? Like, I mean, you should represent with your target system with one business system name only and one logical system. So that's why if this logical system is there is a business system already created using this logical system, you get an error. So that's why that's what the error we got. And I changed this value to something else. so that we can use this logical system name. Okay. Yeah. So once you select this, now here, this is the place where you can list down the objects that you wanted to replicate. So here I wanted to replicate these two objects. So that's where you can, through business object type, your OTC. So you can click on new entry. So you can choose 194 is for material master. Okay. And for the, what is the next one? Customer master. For customer master 266, I believe 266 customer. Okay. 159. Okay. So 159 is for customer master. So that's it. So we are specifying these are the two objects that I wanted to replicate to this target system. Okay. So now after this, the next one, for each object, what is the communication technique that you wanted to replicate, use? So let's select your material master, go further down. Okay. Now here, target system one, business object type 194. Okay. Now you can replicate using these four techniques. Replication via services, nothing but it's a SOA. This is a IDOC, file, and RFC based. So let's use IDOC. Okay. And once this is completed, then we will discuss about for which object, what is the recommended approach. Because here you see IDOC is there, SOA is there. But which one we will go with? What is the recommended approach? So that we will discuss once we complete this DRF configuration. Okay. So I'm choosing here IDOC for material master replication. Here IDOC. Okay. So along with that one, okay. So now we also need to specify few other stuff. Okay. So there is something called key harmonization and update key mapping. Okay. So what is this significance of these two properties? Okay. So till now it's clear. So we're specifying target system, your object, and what is the communication channel. Now, along with that one, we also wanted to learn about what is these two settings. Okay. So for this one, let's see here. Okay. So any guess what is that? I think from anyone having idea on that. So this is my MDG system. This is a target system one. This is my target system two. Okay. Now I created a material. Okay. So user logged into the system and he created a material and say it created. So the material number is 100. Okay. So material 100 got created in this system. Now, when I replicate this particular material to this particular target system, okay, what should be the material number here? What are the possibilities that you can think of? Forget it, MDG. So in general, right? So when you are receiving some IDOC or something from some source system, so it will create some materials, customers, vendors, right? So you think in that case, so what is the possibility? Like, what is the material number that you can think of here?
That depends on the number range, right? Whether it's internal number range.
Yes. Okay. So let's say, for example, if it is external number range. Okay.
Then the same 100 should be replicated in the transaction.
So
target system.
exactly. Yeah. Here 100 will get created. Okay. Fine. Now, if it is internal number range,
The next number, yeah. The
next number. Let's say, for example, the next number is, I'll say, let's say 110 is the next number. So these are the two possibilities. Now we don't have any issue if it is a external number range because the number is same across all these systems. Okay. The issue comes if it is internal number range. Okay. In this case, 110, which is fine. It created 110. Now next time the user is doing some updates to the same material number. Okay. And those updates got again reflected back to your active area. Now this time system will replicate these changes as well to this target system. Now what will happen? Let's say, for example, here your IDOC contains the material number as 100. Okay. So it will go and create a new material or it will go and update this material.
Update the same
It should
material.
not create.
Ideally, it should not create that with a new material number because it's an update scenario. The changes should go and update in this 110 material number. But how my MDG knows that it has to go and update in the target system in T1 target system. So a 110 material number. Same in T2 target system, 210 material number. How MDG knows that? Right? Because it's just like a IDOC, it will go and update. That's where this key mapping functionality come into picture. If you have a scenario where your target systems are also configured as a external number ranges and your keys are same across all the SAP systems, absolutely no issue. So you can just go ahead with, you can just go ahead.
Hey, you know, ZaranTech now offers SAP corporate training. That's right. Train your workforce in SAP with our comprehensive program. We offer customized courses, certified trainers, and hands-on labs for both individuals and businesses. Our standout features: bespoke training, fully configured servers for practice, in-house materials, and a dedicated LMS. Plus, get session recordings and 24/7 support. From functional to technical modules, we have got it all. Choose ZaranTech for SAP training and watch your team excel. Learn, upskill, succeed with ZaranTech.
Like this, yeah. Just save the changes. Your business system target one setup is completed. The challenge comes if the target systems are one or all the target systems are using this particular internal number range. That's where SAP introduced a functionality called key mapping. Okay, key mapping functionality. Key mapping. That means it has to map the keys of all the objects. The same problem can occur for for BP, customer, vendor, any object. Now, how SAP address this issue using key mapping using key mapping. So that means here, when you enable this, when you're here, what you are saying, I'm saying is to this target system one for material master, I'm replicating the data using IDOC. I wanted to enable the key mapping. So you need to choose this option. And at the same time, you also need to select this checkbox, update key mapping. Okay, so when you do this one, what happens is this, I'm exclusively saying only in case of internal number range scenario, which means the source and target keys are different. In that case, you can activate this functionality. You no need to write any single line of code, just activate this functionality and you need to do one additional configuration step. Okay, so with that, what happens is, so when you enable the key mapping, when system is replicating first time during the creation scenario, it's replicating the data to your target system one. Here in MDG itself, in within your MDG, SAP actually created one table, that table called key mapping table, key mapping table. Okay, in this key mapping table, it maintains what is your business system. Okay, so business system and key. Here, my business system is for MDG, key is 100. Okay, so there will be an entry made. While it is replicating, system will actually make an entry into this table and then the data will be replicated to this target system. Okay, now after that, once in the target system, the IDOC posted successfully. Now I need the key that got created in my target system back to my MDG. Okay, back to MDG, I need this key. Otherwise, I don't know what is the key it got created in the target system. So based on your ad hoc knowledge, how we can actually, any idea on this, like how you can get the data?
Like from target system to back to MDG.
Have you heard about this one? Message type, ALEAUD, message type.
To send the status update.
Yeah, yeah. So usually with before MDG, we also use this ALE AUD. We configure this, right? So because just to know the status, the IDOC posted successfully in the target system or not. Okay. For that one, in general, in above world, we use this ALE AUD, audit acknowledgement IDOC. So for every IDOC that you are replicating from your MDG to the target system or one SAP system to other SAP system, so this is like, it is like this. Okay. So you have your SAP 1 and this is your SAP 2. Okay. If I'm replicating the data from here to here, let's say MatMas. Okay. So you will be doing all your partner profile configuration here and here. Okay. In this case, this becomes your source. This becomes your target. Similarly, you can also configure from here to here ALE AUD. So in this case, this becomes your source. This is your target. Now, what this ALE AUD contains is basically what is your source IDOC. For the source IDOC, what is the material number and everything, the status of this particular IDOC, that will be sent in another IDOC from your target to source system. It also carries the key of the key that got created in the target system. That means my 110 material number is also automatically gets populated. This is an existing functionality of audit for every inbound request. So what is the key that will be captured in your ALE AUD in the message type, and that will be sent back to the source system. So SAP exactly use the same concept. They haven't introduced any new technique because anyway ALE AUD is there. So what, and in the ALE AUD it contains this particular the key of the target system. So all this is existing process. The only thing is that if you are using this key mapping functionality, it's not only setting up this replication from here to here, you also need to configure ALE AUD in case if you are using ad hoc technique. In case if you are using ad hoc technique, that too your keys are different, then this is an additional activity, additional ALE AUD configuration. You have to do it from target to source in MDG. So once you do this configuration, when this ALE AUD comes to your source system, in our case MDG system, and when this gets posted successfully in the same inbound function module, so SAP enhanced that existing function module, okay, the process code that is linked to this function module, that they in the enhancement they did some enhancement with respect to MDG, and in that what it will do is it will make an entry into this table T1 target system business, the key is 110. Okay, so this is the entry it will make. So this entry will be made in your key mapping table by the ALE AUD if you are using ad hoc. If you don't configure this one, there won't be any entry. Okay, similarly you have T2 target system. So from T2 also you need that if this is also key mapping enabled and keys are different, then you need to configure ALE AUD from here to here as well. So there will be two ALE AUD you need to configure from each target system to MDG system. Okay, so now this second ALE AUD, when it comes over here, it will make one more entry over here. Okay, so here it will make an entry T2 and 210, the key. Likewise, so from all the target systems, if ALE AUD is configured, so the key mapping table will get updated with the keys of your source and target systems. This is fine. Now let's look at your update scenario. When user updated the same material, right? And after that, once the CR got activated successfully, then what happens is when the IDOC is being sent from your MDG to the target system, it will come to first this table. Okay. In this particular table, at the IDOC control record level, you will have your partner profile, that is the target system, right? So it will compare, is there any entry maintained for that target system? Okay. So there is an entry T1. For T1, it will take what is the key, okay, 110. Then after that, what it will do is, it will update all your IDOC structures wherever material is there, that value matter is there, that will be replaced with 100 with 110. Okay, so that means now your IDOC got updated with the target key. Then this IDOC goes to the target system. There you already have 110 material, so it will exactly go and update the same material. So if from MDG, if you look at your W02 and outbound IDOC, if you expand that IDOC and segments, there you will find, if you look at the material number, you don't see 100 material number, you will see 110 material number, because by the time it's already replaces that key mapping entry. Okay, by any chance, if this entry is not there, which means maybe this inbound ALE AUD got failed, so there won't be any entry in your this one. Then what happens after that? If someone modify this material in between, so what happens? There won't be any entry identified in this key mapping table. Then it won't replace. It will just simply send with 100 only. Your IDOC will send that material. 100 IDOC will contain the 100 material number. Then in the target system, 100 material is not there, or probably 100 material is there with some, that is for different material data. It will go and update the wrong material with 100, or else if that material number itself does not exist, it will create a new material. Okay, so that means you need to be very careful when you are handling this, because if that acknowledgements are getting failed, we need to act upon fast. Otherwise, if the same updates are happening, then you will have an issue like this. Is this clear to all of you? What is key mapping functionality? Sorry,
Here we can see ALE AUD.
Configuration.
it's a this one, right? Message type, just like MatMask. It's just like MatMask. So go to this one. Okay, let's say for example, see ALE AUD is there. just like how your message types are there. So this is also one message type ALU, but this is an MDG system, right? So you need to configure this ALU AUD in your receiving side, in the inbound side. Your matmask will be here in outbound, and your ALU AUD should be in the inbound. It's just a message type configuration. So you can click on in the inbound, okay, the ALU AUD in the inbound. Process code AUD 1 or 2. AUD 2 is also there. AUD 2. You just configure this inbound in the inbound. So there also in the target system, that's what I mentioned. So in the target system as well, you need to configure as a in the outbound side, and on MDG it should be on the inbound side, receiving side. Just like how you configure matmask, debmask, cremas, ALU AUD also you need to just configure.
Both inbound and outbound?
Yeah. So it's just like when you're configuring matmask, right? So you will do it in both the systems, right? MD is a source system and target system. In the source, it will be outbound, and in the target system, it will be inbound. The same way, this is like from the it is a outbound in the target system, and in the MDG, it is acts as an inbound message type. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Any confusion? Okay. So any questions on this? So now you can see here, if you don't select this checkbox update KM, even though when ALE AOD comes, it won't update your K mapping table. So that's why both will go together. Okay. Now if you are not using key mapping functionality, you can specify it as a not defined, just like not defined like this. Okay. There is one more option is also there, harmonized IDs. So what is the difference between harmonized ID? Basically, it is acts as your not defined only. Okay, so we always either go with key mapping or not defined. That's it. This harmonized ID means there's no key mapping. So it just like acts as not defined only. When you say here not defined, there won't be any entry made into your key mapping table. Okay. Any questions? Is this clear? Okay, fine. So if this is about key mapping thing. After that, we also discussed here saying that DRF data replication framework also deals with inbound and outbound. Okay, so by default, where is this? Yeah, so by default, when you are creating this business system, by default it assumes this as your target system outbound. I mean, this is a target system, but you can, in the same way, you can also represent with the source system. Source system is when you're creating a business system, you can provide some name, but how I can specify this as a source system. So you have this option, storage. Okay. In the storage, if by default, if you don't specify anything not defined, that means this acts as your target system. Other than this not defined, if you specify any other options, okay, there are 3 different options are there. So in these 3 different options, if you choose any of these option, that means it acts as an inbound system. I mean, it acts as your source system, source to MDG. Okay. So not defined means it's an outbound scenario. If you, other than this option, if you select any of these 3, that indicates that it's an inbound scenario. That means system expects some data will flow from this source system to MDG system. Okay. So now we have 3 options. In case of source system, there are 3 options are there. Okay. So what are these 3 options? What is the difference between this 1, 2, 3? Okay.
Actually, wait, can you see the key mapping table?
Yeah, I'll show you that one. I'll show you that one. Okay. Once we complete this configuration, then I'll show you that. Okay. So now in this, we have 3 options, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So let's look at this one. This is an inbound scenario. You have some source system. Okay. Now this is your MDG and this is your underlying ERP. Okay. Now we call this as a active area and this is your staging area, right? Now option 1 is basically, if you look at this, okay, option 1. So option 1 means staging area. That means whatever the data that comes from this particular source system, it will go to your staging area. That means here it launches a change request process. From the change request process, the data gets created into your staging area. And once the CR is approved and activated, then the data will move to your active area. Okay. So this is the option 1. When you specify this as a staging area like this, that means this is the process it will follow. That means it is going through your MDG process. So it will launch a change request and the change request workflow will get triggered whether it's auto approval or probably some approval process, then whatever the rules that we configured up, the BRF rules or the business rules, right? So using baddies that whatever we discuss. So using all those rules, your data will get enriched. And once the CR activation is successful, the data will move to your active area. This is fine. Through MDG, that request will go through the MDG process. Okay. So now you also have something called option 2, active area. Okay. So when you specify like this, what happens is it will actually it will just directly send the data to your active area. This is your option 2, which means there is no change request gets created. Just like here, we saw this one, right? Like sending one IDOC from one system to other system. There is no change request process involved in this one. It's just like a AP through the data will get created through your BAPI API. Nothing, no change request, nothing. So here it acts as like this. Without when you specify here active area, so active area means the data directly goes to your active area without change request process. That means here we are bypassing your MDG process. Okay. Now there's a third option. It says active area, but in case of error, staging area. That means what happens is in this case, first it will try to post into your active area. Okay. So if it gets posted successfully, no issues. If it results into some error, maybe because of some missing mandatory data or because of certain checks got failed, okay, your ERP checks, then it will get failed. If it get failed, only in case of failure, it will launch a CR process. That means it will launch a CR process and it will actually stop in your staging area. If you configure some workflow, it will stop in your staging area and someone has to open that CR and what is the missing data. So then they can actually correct that data and they can approve that request so that it will again come back to your active area. So these are the 3 ways that you can actually handle the incoming request from source system to MDG system. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So
3 then actually.
Okay, 3 is what happens is it will try to first it will post the data in your active area. It will try to post the data in your active area. Okay. Assume that you are actually there is that IDOC and you are getting that IDOC and the IDOC got failed because of some data issue. If it gets posted, material will get created successfully. Just similar to your 2 scenario. If it gets failed, right? So usually what happens, your IDOC got failed. What you do usually when IDOC got failed, someone has to monitor the failed IDOCs and you cannot correct that IDOC there, right? So you will analyze that why this IDOC got failed. Maybe some mandatory information is missing. Then you will ask the source system again to correct the data and send with the proper IDOC. That means you cannot take action on your own, because usually in the production systems, we cannot modify or edit that IDOC data. Of course, there is a T code W19. From W19, you can correct that segments and fill that data and submit it. But that we are not supposed to do because there shouldn't be any manual intervention, right? So usually in that case, that means when the request got failed, so you without MDG, usually you'll have a dependency with the source system to correct the data. But in this case, what happens is if you launch a CR process for the failed one, CR also obviously it will get failed because the validation check will get failed but when it get failed, then we will assign that work item to some user, some business user. Okay. So that business user can look at why this particular data got failed, what is the validation error or something. Then they can correct the data. And they can actually again resubmit that request. So this time it will get success. Is it clear?
No, because if the IDOC itself is getting failed, the material itself is not created in the system, right? At the ERP level in the active area.
Yes.
So how the
Yeah, that material is not created. That's why it is creating a CR, right? CR is for the new material creation process only. That material won't be there here, but it can insert it. You can create the material in your staging area, right?
Manually following the MDG process, right? The CR process.
It's not manual, it's automatic. If you choose this option, it automatically creates the CR. In the CR, you will have the dollar symbol.
Okay. Understood.
Okay, that is as good as you are creating an MDG by clicking the create material option.
Okay. So the inbound FM, whatever is handled in this ERP, so it should submit a CR when it ends up in error. That's what you are saying that.
Yeah, the inbound process itself, that automation, that process itself automatically creates a CR, and the CR, it will submit that CR. Okay. Now the CR got submitted. It will go through all your validations, that checks that we have at that particular step, your BRF validations, BADI validations, and everything, ERP validations, and everything. And there, what happens anyway, it will get failed, because if it get failed in direct IDOC creation from CR also, your validation will get failed for sure. Okay. But here the advantage is you are not leaving that work item like without assigning to anyone. So usually in the workflow, what you do, if a validation error or something comes, right, you will assign it to some person, like any user. If the workflow gets failed, the validation get failed, you assign it to some person. That person can, so that person will receive all these CRs with him. If he opens his inbox, he will see all the failed CRs where he can take some action. Now I will open that individual CR. I will see what are the errors, and if those errors can be corrected, I can correct that error and I will approve my request. Then it goes to your active area. Any confusion? So yeah, I'll tell you. Let me again explain. See, you are receiving data from one system to other system. Okay. Now let's say I send 100 requests. Okay. Now all the 100 requests not necessarily get success over here, right? Maybe some requests might have some data issue. Okay. Now think about all the successful, let's say out of 100, 90 requests are successful. Okay. I mean, the data is correct. That means here 90 request data gets posted successfully, which we consider it as a happy path. Okay. So you are sending the data, it is creating this one. Okay. Now what happens is, we know this is a success path and these materials will get created, this object will get created successfully. Why I wanted to, some people think that, okay, why I wanted to waste my change request numbers, right? So so only my focus is only for the requests which have a bad data or which doesn't follow my rules. Only that particular request only I wanted to create a CR. For happy path scenarios, I wanted to directly create in my active area, right? In that case, this option will be helpful, or basically these two options will be used in a different manner. Okay, I'll explain that one. If you understand this process 3, it's a very simple. It will try to simulate the data posting in your active area. Okay, so for every BAPI you see, there is a simulation option. So what happens when it is trying to post into your active area, it will first simulate. If the simulation gives some errors, which means there are some data issues are there, then immediately it actually launches a CR process, and that CR will be submitted to some user. That use from now onwards, because it has some errors, so it gives an opportunity to edit the data and correct that data and submit that request. So there are two ways. One, if you leave your IDOC as is, you cannot edit the data. Okay, so you have to rely on your upstream system. But if I launch a CR process, I can open the CR and I can correct the data. It gives me UI, user interface, where I can correct the data and submit that request. That's the difference. Any questions? Is it clear still? Now, what is your doubt where you are getting confused? I'll try to explain.
Yeah. What I asked previously is like when the third step is set, I'll go with the second step. Second step is like directly the inbound IDOC is creating the data in the active area. There is
Yes.
no CR step process involved, right? In the second
Yes.
step.
Yes.
So the third step is also that the data will go into the active area with the help of the, now you told, right, mapping simulate. So the purchase, like the material creation of the creation of customer or the vendor. So in that case, when that mapping simulation has some error, so it automatically submits a CR.
Yes.
Now it is clear.
Yeah, it submits us here. So now you take the second case. Okay, in second case, if the IDOC creation, if you use the option 2, right? If IDOC got failed, so do you think that you can take some action over there? Think about in your production system, you got some IDOC and IDOC got failed. It got into error state. That means the data is not created, right?
Correct.
So what you do? How do you
Totally.
correct that one?
Yeah, then as you mentioned, then we will request that our source system to resend the data by checking the error in the target system, like what is that mandatory field missing. That is one
Yes.
way we will do. Or the reprocess, as you mentioned, W19.
Yeah, W19, ideally, we are not supposed
We
to
are not, yeah.
edit the data
Correct.
because from audit point of
master
view, the audit team will raise a concern. If they notice that any IDOCs that manual, if someone is editing, then they will raise a concern on that one. So that is strictly not allowed. Not only in any customer, in anywhere, IDOCs, anything that data that comes through some interfaces, right? We are not supposed to correct that one. So that means basically, if you look at this option 2, you have a hard dependency with your source system, right? Why? Because you don't have any medium or UI where you can go and correct the data in case of option 2. Okay. But if I have an option, right? Let's say what is this third option? The third option gives you that in case of errors, maybe out of 100, maybe 10 got failed, 90 got success. So 90 will directly post in your active area. For the remaining 10, it launches 10 CRs and the work item will be submitted to some user. So you will, in this case, you will use one change request type. You configure one change request type. For that, system will pick up the change request type. In the workflow, you say that, okay, if the validation got failed, then your next step will be maybe some user, some business user, steward or something. So what happens? Once the request got submitted, it automatically goes to the next step, and the work item will be assigned to that user. Now that user can log into MDG system on daily basis. Okay. So let me show you here.
So that means the new CR is not getting created, right? We are re-triggering the existing CR at a new step.
There is no existing CR. It's a new CR, right? Let me show
So
you.
this
Let
you
me
are
show you.
talking about activation failure.
We are not talking about activation failure. We are talking about option 3, the direct activation. Activation failure is in CR thing. Okay. So we are talking about this scenario where the data, it will try to post the data in your ERP. If that data is not posted correctly because of some error, then it will create a brand new CR, some new change request number, and that CR will be assigned to some user. That means that particular user, right? He can always log into this workflow inbox. He can open that CR. Okay, so what are the requests that are pending with him? He can look at that. Okay, so if there are nothing pending, but he can see assigned to me or whatever here. He can use all these criteria and he can see the change request. And from the change request number, he will open that CR and he can correct the data. He can take some action. So it gives a medium. Okay, in W19, why we are not recommending to edit? Because that raises a compliance issue. But here, when you have a CR, right? So then you can open that UI, you can correct the data and submit that request. So you can take some action here basically. Still any questions on this? Okay. Yeah, I mean, feel free to, if you still didn't understand, let me know what exactly is where you are getting confused. I'll try to give that explanation in different formats. Maybe one of the explanation might, you can connect to that one. It's very simple. Like if it gets failed, it will create a CR, and in the CR, all this data will get added, and that CR can be submitted. It will automatically submit, programmatically it will submit. Okay. So now in your regular scenario, let's say you have this setup, source system and MDG system in your regular setup where the materials are, customers or vendors get created in this system regularly, right? In this case, always we follow this approach because this is what the recommended approach. Every request that is coming to my MDG system, it has to come through the CR process and get enriched and validated, governed that particular master data, and finally replicate the data to my active area. So this is what we are actually going to configure, always one only. But why SAP given 2 and 3 options? Assume that you have some migration activity. You wanted to, when you are going for before go live, you wanted to migrate maybe some 1 million or some 100 millions of records, right? So the data is already there in the source system, right? Now in this case, if you use this channel, what happens? It will create those many CRs, and when it creates those many CRs, your system performance will go down when it is processing all these requests. Because there is a difference between when you directly create that material, any object in your active area, it won't take much time. But when you take it through MDG process, it has to launch the CR process, then it will go through all the checks. And then sometimes, for example, if it requires some approval, or something get failed, so the work item will be assigned to some user to take some action. So all that process is there because we are adding this MDG layer. So obviously there will be delay in posting the data, right? So think about 100 millions of records. So it will create those many CRs and it will consume the system resources like that, those many system resources. And during the migration, you will have some bottleneck or some performance degradation, right? So that's where some people, what they think is they choose this option. Okay, let's post all the data and they choose between 2 and 3. If they choose 2, then all these 100 materials they try to post it in here. But if they choose 3, they try to post all the 100 millions of materials to your active area. Maybe out of these things, probably some 5% or 10% got failed because of some errors. Only those things will system will launch a CR process, and then they can take the action over here. So they don't need to focus on 100 millions of materials. Their focus will be only some 5% of that one. So the volume get reduced. The CR that only for the migration approach. This is recommended exclusively only for migrations, but your day-to-day regular inbound flow, you always choose this option. Is clear? Okay. Yeah. So this actually talks about whether you wanted to go with this system, this business system is a target system or a source system. So that's where. So by default, it will be by default it considered as a target system. But if at all you wanted to consider it as a source system as well, then you can specify and choose this one. Always choose. If you are configuring this as a source system, choose staging area only for your regular flow. Okay.
What sets ZaranTech apart in SAP corporate training? It's our unique blend of expertise and innovation. We offer customized courses tailored to each client's needs, ensuring relevant, targeted learning. Our vast trainer database brings you wisdom from the best in the field. Need resources? Access our extensive training material repository anytime. We are all about measurable results, providing detailed student metrics to track progress. And we don't just teach, we build community. Join our thriving social media network, connecting learners beyond boundaries. With ZaranTech, you are not just training, you are transforming your SAP expertise.
So after this, your business system. So actually we spent some time only on the key mapping and the storage thing, but otherwise this for the explanation part only to make you understand. But otherwise creation of this business system is very simple and straightforward. Okay. So once this is done, you can also go to the select your second object and again the same thing. This you wanted to replicate via SOA. So you can use SOA. Okay. And you can take an action. Now we talked about key mapping for ad hoc scenario where you need to configure the, okay. So if you are using, I'm just saying here from MDG context, okay. If you are using ad hoc technique, then you need to configure here ALE for each target system, okay. But if you are using SOA replication, that is much easier. So here, so basis will be doing every SOA message comes with request and response. Okay. That means as part of your SOA configuration itself, basis will send out configure outbound request and inbound response. So it's a both should go together. Okay. So you no need to do all this ALA like ALE. So now in this case, if it is a SOA, in case of SOA, so this response message carries the object that got created here and it will update the key mapping table. Okay. So that's what in case of SOA, the response SOA response carries the key that got created in the target system. In case of ad hoc replication, you need to configure this additionally LEAUD, which carries your key that got created in the target system. Okay. So now here, so the rest everything, if you need key mapping, you can enable. Otherwise, if you don't enable this key mapping, so even though the key comes as part of the response, but it won't update your key mapping table. So that's it. So this is about, likewise, you can create as many as business systems, depends on your in the landscape to how many systems you wanted to replicate the master data. Okay. So step 1 is completed here. Any question? Is this clear to all of you? It's a very simple. So we define one business system and we assign logical system for each business system here, logical system. Okay. And then we assign what are the objects that I wanted to replicate and what is the communication technique. Along with that one, we'll also specify the key mapping settings if required. Okay. So if this is clear, then the next one is step 2. So step 2, where we create the replication models. Okay. So always remember, you can have multiple replication models for same object, but we always keep active one only. Okay. So let's go to define replication model, step 2. Okay. So here you can create your replication models. So click on new, let's say RM underscore replication model for Okay, this log days is like during this replication, there will be SLG1 logs that get created. So how many days you wanted to keep these logs, because this will helpful for you in the production. So during the replication, if some error is there, so if at all you wanted to look at the SLG1 logs, you can specify how many days you wanted to keep the logs. So if you don't mention anything here, automatically basis will have some default archiving job that will delete all the logs after 30 days. So, okay, so that actually you can keep it blank also. These logs will be there for 30 days and after that the logs will get deleted. Okay, so basically these days, this setting will tell you how many days you wanted to keep the logs in the system, SLG1 logs. Okay, so we'll see this. I'll show you that in the system. And after that, this replication model, you are creating it for which object? Okay, so once you create this replication model for then go to under this, there is something called outbound implementation. Okay, so here what we discussed on the replication model, we'll assign that model and we will assign the business systems. Okay, so business target systems will assign over here. Before assigning the target system, there is something called outbound implementation. Okay, so this outbound implementation, SAP provided out-of-box outbound implementations for all the objects. So what is this outbound implementation? Mainly it. So this outbound implementation contains something called DRF class, replication class, or DRF class. Okay. Now, what this DRF class will do is basically this contains the core logic. Okay. So what happens basically? See here, MDG, your active data stays here, let's say for example, and you have the DRF class. Okay, so similar to your access class, what this DRF class will do is, inside this DRF class, there is a method called send method. Okay, so inside that send method, it will read the data from your active area. Okay, and in this, once it read the data from your active area, here it prepares, if it is a IDOC replication, it will prepare IDOC segments. If it is a SOVA replication, it will prepare the SOVA related nodes. So it will basically, it has that logic to read the data and prepare that in a required format. Okay, and just trigger that. If it is a IDOC, it will call that matmas IDOC or that API, right, which will actually call that, trigger that IDOC. So it will call that one. So basically this DRF class is responsible for reading the data from your active area, or basically reading the data your active area record, and then prepare the outbound structures and trigger that SOVA message. So that logic is there in this particular DRF class. Since now we are talking about here, let's say we are talking about For you can replicate the data using like IDOC or SOVA, and we have other RFC and other stuff as well. For BP also, we have IDOC and SOVA. Similarly for finance, for other objects like article and for every object, you have these different techniques it supports. Okay, so now, so there will be SAP created one outbound implementation, which contains one unique, one DRF class. Okay, similarly for this one also, you have some outbound implementation 2. It has another DRF class, which has that logic very specific to and SOVA. This has the logic and specific to IDOC. Similarly, for every object, like for customer, for vendor, so there is a different outbound implementations are available. Okay, so depends on your technique. You are replicating using IDOC, right? So then that too for material master. So let's click on new entry. When you do F4 or okay, so here you have, so these are the this is the latest one. If you take I underscore mat underscore v2, this is the outbound implementation SAP provided for material master, and it always uses IDOC. So if you are using IDOC replication, you need to use this outbound implementation. We will discuss in detail about this outbound implementation. I'll show you the standard configuration because that will helpful for you to troubleshoot in your production scenarios. But at this point of time, I'm just showing that, okay, there's an outbound implementation that exists, and this outbound implementation contains majorly the DRF class. The DRF class is assigned to this particular outbound implementation. Okay, so since I wanted to replicate material master data to target one system using outbound IDOC, so that's why I selected this. Now under this, I'll select the business system. That is nothing but whatever the business system that we created, target one. Okay, save these changes. So now if we look at, we created one replication model. We added the right outbound implementation. Under that right outbound implementation, we assigned the business system. So here, your replication model, that is for which data model, along with that one, we also assign outbound implementation. Under this outbound implementation, we specify this one, T1 target system. Okay, and also we wanted, if you have one more system, right? So then you can create another business system and assign here T2 as well. Here you can add as many as business systems. Okay, so for material master, there will be one replication model that should be active. That replication model, under that replication model, you will assign all the target systems that you wanted to replicate this material data to those target systems. Okay, so once this is what that replication model configuration. Now, once you do this configuration, replication model configuration, okay, so now this is what my replication model. But you can see here it is not yet active. And what happens when you create your CR and once the change request got approved, activated successfully, I mentioned yesterday, the system will take the active replication model. It will take the active replication model only. That means once the CR got activated successfully, it will read among all the available replication models for that particular data model, which is active. So it will, once it find the active replication model, from there it will identify your outbound implementation target systems. Then it further go to this target system and your key mapping settings and everything. And then finally it creates the IDOC or SOA message. Okay, that means once you create this one, you need to activate this replication model. Okay, so when you click on this activate, there is an activate button. Click on this. It will get failed. This one, we'll see why it got failed. Okay, so it got failed. So that activation of your replication model got failed. And what it says is something called outbound parameter packet size bulk not assigned to this outbound implementation. Okay, so that means, so this, what happens is, first let me show you the outbound implementation. Yeah, you can see under data replication only, there is something called define outbound implementations. Okay, here you will find your outbound all the whatever in the F4 I showed you, right? So you will find all the outbound implementation. SAP delivered outbound implementations, 1000 finance accounting chart of account, and this uses the server service. So you will find the replication via file, replication via services, IDOC. So all the outbound implementations for all the objects. Okay, so for material master, we have IE underscore, right? So let me, so yeah, so this is the outbound implementation which we used. Now, in this outbound implementation only, so you can see here, let me read only. Okay, now you can see here, it uses communication technique, this one, IDOC replication. So this outbound implementation will be used only for IDOC replications of material master. Okay, so both are same. This is the latest version and this is the old one. Okay, now here itself, there is a outbound implementation class. You can see MDG mat IDOC replication. Now, if you open this particular class, okay, so this is a standard class. Okay, you'll have some other. So this is a send message. So this is the important method. Okay, here it has all the logic to read the data. Okay, and finally, because this is for material master, see send matmas IDOC. So there is a method. It prepares your material structure over here. This is the IDOC structure. And how it prepared? So because there is a, you can see here, handle material data. So it reads the data from your staging tables and it actually, from your active area table. And finally, it prepares the IDOC structure over here. You can keep a breakpoint over here. If something is not working, you can see how the data gets filled over here. So inside this send matmas IDOC, so it will call that the mapping. See, master IDOC create request matmas. This is the place where it actually creates the IDOC, generates the IDOC. Okay, so likewise, this DRF class, every outbound implementation has that class associated with the DRF class. And in the DRF class, all the DRF classes are having this interface, and you can find the logic over here, send message method. Okay. So there is some other sub methods are there, read, complete, date, and all this stuff. You can explore this in the debugging, but this is the class that is responsible to read the data from your active area records and trigger the trigger. It's a SOVA, it will create a SOVA message. It's a IDOC, it will create an IDOC. So you will have separate DRF classes for each of these techniques. Okay. So now why? Okay. So now coming back to our DRF. Yeah. So outbound implementation. Now every outbound implementation along with the DRF class, it also has certain other information like filters. We'll discuss about the filters in the next session. So it also talks about filters, and it also talks about if there are some mandatory parameters. Okay. So every outbound implementation, we can see here, there is a assign outbound parameters. Okay. Here there is one outbound parameter that is assigned to this one, and it's a mandatory. That's why we got this error saying that we got that error, right? Mandatory. Let me try to activate. So we got this outbound parameter packet size bulk not assigned to this. That is assigned to this value is not maintained basically. Okay, because we are using this outbound implementation, but this value is a mandatory value we haven't maintained. So what does that mean is basically whoever is using this outbound implementation, you need to maintain this parameter mandatorily. Okay, so that means in our replication model, so go to this, select this outbound implementation. You can see after assigning the target system, there is assign outbound parameter. So you can go to this assign outbound parameters. Currently, we haven't not maintained anything. You can click on new entry, and when you do F4, it automatically shows the mandatory parameter. Okay. Here you need to maintain some value. So let's say, for example, 100. By looking at this, do you guys recollect anything in doc replication when you configured your IDOCs?
Yeah, packets.
Packet size, you mentioned packet size, right? Okay, you will mention some packet size. See here,
Collect
the same parameter. Yeah, this is the same parameter there because we are using our IDOC. And what is the packet size? Basically, maybe 100 IDOCs per packet. So like that, you will specify what is that the packet size, the same parameter SAP provided over here. So usually we keep here not more than 100. So you can keep it 50 or 10 or 100. Okay. So those are the most commonly used this one. Okay. So you can maintain 100 or 50 as well. So once you maintain this, because it's a mandatory parameter, see, it's a checkbox is there. So if I open this outbound implementation there, this parameter configured it as a mandatory. So wherever I'm using this outbound implementation, I need to maintain this value. That's why my replication model activation got failed. Now I maintained this value. So if I go to my replication model, I select this replication model and click on active. We maintained it. Just a minute. I didn't save it properly. Okay, so now let me activate. This time, this replication model got activated. So whenever I create a new CR now, system will look up an active replication model for that object. So if I'm creating material CR, so there is an active replication model already available for MM. So it will take this one. And from here, it will look up what is the outbound implementation DRF class it has to call through this one, and what are the target systems that are there. Okay. Now it will take each individual target system and it will go back to your step one there, whether it's a key mapping enabled, not enabled, all the other remaining information will be picked up, and accordingly it will trigger that message. So it is as simple as. So in MDG layer, we are doing only the configuration part. The rest, your SOVA configuration or your partner profile configuration, those should exist as a prerequisite for this one. Okay. Any questions on this? Is clear to all of you what is this DRF configuration?
Yeah.
Okay. So once this data replication configuration is completed, now let's look at some scenarios here. So I created a CR and this got activated successfully. Then your DRF come into picture. It will look up all the DRF configuration, IDOC configuration, everything. Finally, the data will be through this one. The data will be sent to target system. Okay, so this is the end-to-end process. Step 2. Assume that in the target system, your IDOC got failed. because of some reason, right? Now you might need to send that IDOC again from MDG. Okay, so we cannot again create a CR and all this stuff. So SAP provided a manual replication. Okay, so in this in case of this manual replication, there are two ways that you can actually replicate the data. One is through NWBC. Okay, so that means you go to your MDG this one homepage. Okay, you see here search applications, right? So we know this search application. Okay, let's set some materials. Okay, here let's select one material. Now you have an option to replicate the data. You can select one or multiple. So 24, 25. Okay, I wanted to replicate this because there's some issue happened there, the data not replicated, or because of some technical issues it got stuck somewhere. Okay, you wanted to re-replicate. So then you can again select all the objects, click on replicate. The objects that you got selected over here, at the same time it shows the target systems. Okay, you can choose which, this is the target system which we created, right? You can choose this target system and there is an option to replicate the data, which will create the IDOC and it will send the data. So at that point of time, we have here some settings. Test run means it's a simulation. It will try to simulate whether this will success or failure. And also there is something called filters. So what is this filter concept that we will discuss in the next session? This is also plays very important role when it comes to the DRF. Okay, so we will discuss in the next session what is this particular filter. So basically this filter is you can maintain certain filters from source to target, from MDG to the target system. When you are replicating the data, you can apply certain filters. So it will replicate only if the filter criteria, whatever you maintained, if that get passed, then only it will replicate the data. If that gets failed, it won't replicate. It has to pass through that the filter. Okay, so you know what do you mean by filter, right? So basically if the filter, it matches with the filter criteria, it will replicate. Otherwise, what should happen? So that's where actually that filter come into picture, and it plays, we have different type of filters, simple filters and complex filters. So that we will discuss in detail in the next session. Okay, so but here it says whether you if the filters are already applied, whether you wanted to apply that filters, or without applying the filters also you wanted to replicate. Okay, so this is one way where you can replicate the data. Okay, there is again another option, another way is also there. Okay, so that one is, let me, that the T code is DRF out. DRF out is the T code. So these are both are like on ad hoc basis replication. Okay, one is through NWBC from the search application. The other one is DRF out. DRF out is the T code. Okay, so this is the T code. Now you need to select the replication model. If at all I wanted to, this is the one T code for all the objects. So depends on the replication model that you choose. Okay, for material master, you want master. Outbound implementation also you can choose. Okay, here. Now, okay, so this DRF out is like, we don't actually recommend this this T code. In fact, if there is an option, better not to assign this transaction code access to, not to provide this transaction code access to any users. Okay, why? Because this is very, I would say, a dangerous T code. Okay, what happens is, now you see here, I entered my replication model and I entered my outbound implementation. I can, if I directly click on execute button, if I click on execute button, what happens is it will replicate all the materials. If you have 100 millions of materials in your system, all 100 materials, it will create those many IDOCs, and the entire data it will try to replicate to the target system. Because here what happens is, though you have a filter, okay, you can see here manual filter replication criteria, manual replication filter criteria. Okay, you have this option, but this is basically is a optional. Maintaining the filter here is optional, which means, okay, if I can go to this filter. Okay, here basically you need to specify what is your material. Okay, what materials you wanted to replicate. Just like here I mentioned, right, I selected some materials, then I went to this replicate activity. But here in this NWBC, it's a mandatory. If you don't select any of your materials, then this will be grayed out. That means you are consciously selecting the materials that you wanted to replicate, and then click on replicate button. So there is no chance of replicating entire data. So that's why we always recommend to use this option for replication. So this is there for all the objects, not only for here. If you open any search application for BP customer, there also everywhere you have this button. So everywhere you need to choose that object and replicate that. Whereas in DRF here, though you have a filters, like you can specify your materials or you can replicate based on material group, material type, all these things are there, but it's an optional activity. If I specify here some materials, let's say some 24 and 25 material numbers, it will and then save your filter criteria. Okay. So then when you go back and when you click on execute, it will replicate only those selected materials. But if you don't, but that is an optional thing. So if you don't select anything, most of the time we usually like have an habit of, okay, mention your replication model outbound implementation and click on execute. Then it by the time when you click on this button, it will try to replicate all the records from your MDG system to the target system. What are the target systems are configured under this outbound implementation, under this replication model, the data will be replicated to all the target systems. Okay. So now what will happen if that happen? If you replicate the entire data, what are the possible consequences that you can think of? Any guess?
It is cause some issues, I think so.
All those things we will be already configured, right? So there's no issue with that. Like internal number range also, when it will ultimately hit that your DRF framework. There it will read the key mapping and everything. That is a normal process. So there is no issue with that one. So from the data wise, how a normal replication works, here also it works the same thing. The consequences are some of the consequences. Okay. Your system is not ready to handle those many volumes at this point of time. Let's say, for example, think about 100 millions of records it is replicating, which means it will create 100 millions of IDOCs, right? So it directly you are bombarding your target system with those many IDOCs. Here itself, creating those many IDOCs, it will consume a lot of system resources. Okay, your system unnecessarily, there will be too many read operations. And once the IDOC got created, it goes to the target system. In the target system, it will bombard with all those many records, and your target system, like it will update at the DB level those many operations. That will definitely have an impact on because it's a transactional system, right? There might be other processor also running in the transaction system. It will impact the existing transactional activities as well. That is one of the usually, even if at all you wanted to do all the data replication also, we do in a controlled manner. Let's say send some 10K records or 50K records in one shot. Once that is completed, then again you send some more records. So likewise, so the first and foremost thing, the main important point here is it will have a performance issue, and that can actually bring your target system to down as well because of some bottleneck of the system resources and everything. Okay, so that is one of the main thing. And when I wanted to replicate only 2-3 materials, in place of that one, if you're replicating 100 millions of records, so maybe assume that it will go and override your target system all that data as well. Okay, so if both systems are in sync, then from the data point of view, there won't be any issue. Assume that if there are some of the gaps are there, users are directly updating your target in some materials in the target system, then it will go and override your all those records with your MDG data. Okay, so there are many other complications are also there, but these things are there like performance, and it will go and override the data, and we never know what is the impact because of that override. So that's why this transaction code is provided. So either they should have made it mandatory to maintain at least some filter criteria. Otherwise, in my previous projects, we did some enhancement and we made a hard error that if no filter is maintained, then we don't allow to click on this execute button. So there is some enhancement internally we did, but otherwise don't use this one. Always use your search application where you can select the materials and click on the replicate button. Okay, dig more into the key mapping tables, how I can see the key mapping table, and I will dig into this outbound implementation class, and we'll discuss about the filters and everything. Okay, so there is one more concept is also their value mapping. So that also we will discuss. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.